Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear evidence from a witness on behalf of the National House Building Council. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Good morning, members of the panel. I now call Mr. Steve Evans, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Evans.
Good morning.
I gather you're going to take the oath.
I am.
There should be a testament on the desk next to you. Could you take it in your right hand, please, and read the words on the screen?
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Do sit down, make yourself comfortable. There's water there if you want some. Good, all right?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Evans, good morning to you. Can I start by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry and assisting us with our investigations? We're extremely grateful to you. If you have any difficulty understanding any of my questions, or you'd like me to repeat the question, I'm happy to do that or to rephrase it. Can I also ask you, please, to keep your voice up so that the person who sits to your right, the transcriber, can get down everything you say clearly. Also, please don't nod or shake your head. Yes or no will have to do, because it is only those words that go onto the transcript. Gestures don't. If you want to take a break at any time, other than the scheduled breaks that we'll take at about 11:15 and at about 3:15 this afternoon, then please just say, and we can take a break. I'm going to be showing you documents during your examination, which will appear on the screen in front of you. So if you have any difficulty with the documents as we go through, please indicate, and we can take it more quickly or more slowly, as the case may be. Now, you provided a witness statement to the inquiry. It will appear on your screen in front of you at NHB 403020, please. It's dated, as you can see, 10th of September 2021, this year. Is that the first page of your witness statement to the inquiry?
It is, yes.
Yes. And can we please go to page 119? You'll see a signature there above the date. Is that your signature?
It is, yes.
Have you read this witness statement recently?
I have.
Can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yes.
For completeness, although we won't be going to it, I think you also gave a statement to the Metropolitan Police, yes?
I did, yes.
And we'll put that on the screen. That is at MET 000080645. MET 000080645. It's dated, as you can see, the 27th of May 2021. You can see that there. Have you read this witness statement recently?
I have, yes.
You have. And again, can you confirm that its contents are true?
Yes.
Have you discussed either of these statements or the evidence that you're going to give today with anybody before coming here today?
Only with my legal team.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to start by examining your background, including your qualifications and your experience, before we get to your work at the NHBC. Can we go, please, to paragraph 7 in your statement at the bottom of page 2, your inquiry statement at NHB 403020. At paragraph 7, under the heading Qualifications, Training and Career, you've set it out over onto page 8. To summarise, I think, you have a degree in building surveying and an MBA, yes?
That's correct, yes.
And you have an ordinary national certificate and higher national certificate in building surveying, correct?
I do, yes.
Yes, and it's right, I think, that you are a fellow of the Chartered Association of Building Engineers and a chartered engineer.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Looking at 7C specifically on page 3 there, you say this: I recall attending training as a building control surveyor on the 1992 version of approved document B of the building regulations, which was run by the Institute of Building Control. Have you undertaken training on any subsequent versions of ADB after 1992?
Not specific training, no.
Right. When you say not specific, any general training?
On-the-job training and things in the office, if we've done CPD and things like that.
Right. Just pause there. Mr. Chairman, I don't know whether it's me or whether it's general, but my transcript has stopped working.
Well, ours, I think, are all working.
It is just me. I will continue.
Yes, but you might need to have yours working.
It is now.
Oh, good.
I've just done something to it. Mr. Evans, forgive me. Your answer was on-the-job training and things like that, CPD. Was that formal training or was that learning by experience when you say on-the-job training?
Learning by experience.
I see. And CPD, have you done or did you do any CPD specifically on any post-1992 versions of ADB?
I can't remember.
Right. Does the NHBC in general provide its building control surveyors with regular or indeed any refresher training on ADB?
If there are specifics to be trained on, yes.
When would there be specifics to be trained on?
So, for example, given the combustible insulation progress we went through, we did training at conferences, but also disseminated information through a cascade system through the managers down to their team meetings.
Right. What do you mean by the combustible insulation progress we went through?
But I think that's the issues we'll be discussing today with Kingspan.
Right. So during the period, is this right? During the period 2013 to 16, there was formal training at conferences and dissemination through the organisation.
Yes, that was internal through NHBC.
Right. Let's break that down then. Who designed that training?
So that would have been designed by John Lewis, our fire engineer,
right,
and then approved by myself, Diane Marshall, as the head of technical services as it was then.
Right. And what was the nature of the training materials?
So that would be taking them through establishing what the issues we had with Kingspan, what the solutions were, the Building Control Alliance guidance note, and the procedures that they should follow when they encounter these the applications with combustible materials.
So was this after June 2014 then, once Technical Guidance Note 18 had been developed?
Yes, it would have been after that, yes. Yeah.
Before that time, was there any general training provided by the NHBC to its building control officers on the provisions of ADB, Approved Document B?
I can't specifically remember if there was any.
Now, at 7D on the page in front of you, you say, over my career, I've gained experience in fire safety. Since then, I have kept up to speed in this area by gaining experience through my day-to-day work and ongoing training. When you say you gained experience in fire safety, what do you mean?
So through the course of my career, I'd have been checking applications for building regulations compliance, all the way through from small house extensions through to airport terminals, football stadiums. So that involved obviously keeping myself abreast of Approved Document B and the fire safety provisions within it.
Right. Have you completed any qualifications or courses in relation to fire safety engineering?
No.
Are you a member of the IFE?
I'm not.
You're not. Are you a member of any other specialist fire safety or fire engineering institution?
I'm not.
Now you go on to say, I've kept up to speed in this area through my day-to-day work and ongoing training. What was the ongoing training that you've referred to there?
So that would have been CPD, or if there were revisions to the building regulations, such as in 2006, we may have had CPD sessions in the office with our principals and things like that, but I can't specifically remember if there was any formal training or specific training on that.
And who supervised the distribution or delivery of the training which would result in CPD?
That would generally be the principals or the seniors in the office at the time.
Yes. Now, so who would that have been in 2012, 2013?
They would have been so originally that would be any cascade system would be through the managers, through the team managers, and then down through to their team meetings.
Right. Other than what you've told us, do we understand that you in fact hold no formal qualifications in relation to fire safety engineering and wouldn't hold yourself out as an expert in that regard?
I'm not a fire engineer, no.
No. Now, before you came to work at the NHBC, you were, I think, a building control surveyor at various councils, weren't you?
Yes, I was a building control surveyor at North West Leicestershire District Council. I started there as a trainee in 1991 and progressed through to a principal. And then I left there and moved to Wychavon District Council as the building consultancy manager.
And then I think you were Chief Building Control Surveyor at Milton Keynes Council in and from 2005. Is that,
yes.
Is that right? That's right. And I think it's right also that you worked at the Local Authority Building Control, LABC. Is that right?
I was a member of the what was previously the District Surveyors Association, which then became LABC. And I was there with the permission of my employer to do work on their behalf, yes.
I see. And your employer was who?
That would be initially at North West Hestia District Council, and then with Wychavon, and then latterly with Milton Keynes Council.
I see. So you weren't employed by the LABC? You
No.
weren't. You were a member there as a delegee?
Yes, I was as a delegate on behalf of my authority.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. And when you moved to the NHBC, did you move from Milton Keynes?
Yes.
District Council, that is.
Yes, I left Milton Keynes District Council and moved to NHBC.
Right. Now, you've explained in your statement the roles that you held at NHBC since 2010, which is when I think you started there. And let's look at those parts of your statement which deal with that, please. Can we go to page 3, at the bottom, paragraph 9, if we scroll down? It says, the roles I've held at NHBC with corresponding start dates are set out below, and then you have 6 sub-paragraphs. January 2010, Building Control Manager. August 2011, Building Control Manager, Business Development. December 2012, Building Control Manager, Development and Support. July 2014, Senior Area Technical Manager. November 2018, Senior Technical Operations Manager. And September 2019, Head of Technical Operations. I currently hold this position. In your roles as a Building Control Manager up to August 2011, as you say there, would you have had any dealings with manufacturers of building products?
Very rarely. Very rarely.
And what about in those 2 later roles from August 2011?
Again, very rarely.
Right. What was the difference between Building Control Manager Business Development and Building Control Manager Development and Support that we can see at paragraph 9C?
So as the Building Control Manager, I managed 5 surveying managers who then managed teams of building control surveyors beneath them. I then moved into the Building Control Manager Business Development role, which was, I had no direct line management. I had line management of a couple of assistants, marketing assistants, but that was more focused towards business development and that sort of thing. So I moved away from the manager of managers, if you like.
So you moved away from the actual business of managing surveyors.
The day-to-day management.
The day-to-day management and into business development and support.
Yeah.
I think I see. We may come back to that in due course. Yeah. But just on that, what were your main functions and responsibilities as Building Control Manager, Development and Support?
Again, that was around the business development side, but also then support around technical areas. I've all the way through, I would have managed a team of specialist surveyors. Right. So they were sort of removed from the day-to-day dealings with builder customers, and they would be they would do specialist tasks like research on different parts of the regulations. If we had new regulations, they would do the heavy lifting in terms of looking through what those regulations, what the changes were, what we needed to do, working with our training department on developing the training and that sort of thing.
Right. And you had technical specialist surveyors. Can you name some of them?
Gary Jarvis.
Right.
And then John Lewis joined the team as a fire engineer.
And he joined when?
I can't be certain of the date.
We can find out from him, I think. Now, you then became a senior area technical manager on the 1st of July 2014. What did that new role encompass?
So at that time, we merged our surveying department and our engineering department together. So we had separate entities within the country, in the company of engineering and surveying. We merged those to form technical services.
Right.
A much larger department, and I took on the role of senior area technical manager, which was then managing 5 or 6 area technical managers, which then managed the multidisciplinary teams beneath them.
I see. And did that role still involve development and support of the business?
It didn't involve quite so much development, but obviously supporting those managers, supporting the engineers and surveyors that reported into them, yes.
Right. And was it the same colleagues who reported to you as had reported prior to 1st July 2014, or was it a different group or a bigger group?
It was a bigger group, so it was a different group. So obviously what we did in merging the two departments, the managers from the two departments obviously became, so engineering managers and surveying managers became area technical managers, and they managed multidisciplinary teams at that time.
I see. And once you were senior area technical manager from the 1st of July 2014, to whom did you report?
I reported to the head of technical services, Diane Marshall.
Right. And what about before that? What about from August 2011? Sorry, December 2012.
I reported to Diane Marshall at that time then, who was the group head of building control.
Right. So is it right that you reported to Diane Marshall really from December 2012 until 2018, or?
I still report to Diane Marshall.
You still report to Diane Marshall.
Diane Marshall is now the operations director.
And was there a specific area for which you were responsible?
As I recall, as a senior area technical manager, there was two of us, and I looked after the area technical teams in the south of the country and the southwest.
And who was the other senior area technical manager?
To start off with, I think that was Phil Neville.
Phil Neville.
Phil Neville. And then Jerry Crouch.
Right. And what geographical area did?
So they would look after the north of the north part of the country, if you like, up into Scotland, Northern Ireland, part of Wales, that sort of area. So there's sort of a line between the Wash straight across.
The north-south divide.
The north-south divide, yes.
Right. And how did that role, your new role, differ from that of the building control manager, development and support?
So in terms of when I was the building control manager, I was purely responsible for building control. When the role evolved into the senior area technical manager, we then decided to look at some warranty areas as well. So I was also responsible for some of the warranty risk management for NHBC.
And in that role, did you deal with manufacturers of products in any way?
The role generally meant liaison with customers, so builder customers, occasionally manufacturers, if there was a specific problem with a specific question around a product or something like that.
And you then became Senior Technical Operations Manager in November 2018, before moving to your role of Head of Technical Operations in September 2019. And that's the role you held in September. Is that the role you still hold as at today?
It is, yes.
It is. Can I then turn to look more closely at the functions and divisions of the NHBC as an organisation? You've explained in your statement that the NHBC is divided into various departments and subsidiaries. Now, leaving aside the consultancy and the research arms of NHBC for the moment, which I think you touch on in paragraph 20 of your statement, is it right that the NHBC's two main functions are, first, providing warranties or insurance for properties, and second, providing building control services for properties?
Yes, that's correct.
And am I right that NHBC provides over 80% of the warranty cover for new build properties in the United Kingdom?
It's somewhere between 70 and 80%, yes.
And was that the percentage in the period 2013, 2014, 15, 16?
Something around that, yes. It's varied between 70 and 80%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's correct, and we have this from NHBC's solicitor's letter in September this year, that in 2019, that encompassed some 160,000 properties. Would that be about right?
That sounds about right, yes.
Yes. It's also right, I think, that the NHBC is the largest private sector building control body in the United Kingdom, yes?
In England and Wales, yes.
In England and Wales?
Yes. There are no approved inspectors in Scotland or Northern Ireland.
And is that through its subsidiary NHBC Building Control Services Limited?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Now, in his inquiry statement, Mr. Lewis, John Lewis, estimates that is a market share of some 60% of the residential market. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes.
Yes. It's also right, I think, and correct me if this isn't right, that as an organisation offering financial services, the NHBC is regulated by the Bank of England through the Prudential Regulation Authority.
It is, yes.
Yeah. and its subsidiary, NHBC Building Control Services, BCS, in its role as an approved inspector for building control services, is regulated by the Construction Industry Council Approved Inspectors Register Limited, or CCARE. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
And there's no need to go to this, but you tell us at paragraph 15 of your statement on page 4 that the NHBC is a private company limited by guarantee and has no shareholders. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So it's a non-profit distributing company, but nonetheless makes profits.
Yes.
Yes. Now, that's not the case, is it, for NHBC BCS? That's a limited company with shareholders, isn't it?
It has a single shareholder, which is NHBC.
Correct. And therefore, if the Building Control Services subsidiary makes profits, it distributes it, or can distribute it, or them, to NHBC.
Yes, it can.
Yeah. So in essence, the NHBC makes money, makes profits out of approved inspectors.
It functions as its own business in its own business unit.
Yeah. Well, the aim though for NHBC is to make profits.
Yes.
Yes. Now, we could see this. Let's have a look at it actually. INQ 3015087. What I'm showing you is the annual report and accounts for the NHBC for the financial year 2017 to 18. First of all, have you ever seen these before?
I haven't seen these, no.
But they would be familiar documents to you as
Yes.
a senior person. Yes. Let's go to page 14. This is the Chief Financial Officer's statement. And if you look at the figures on the right-hand side, you can see that in 2017, the NHBC recorded a post-tax profit of £65.2 million, yes?
Yes.
And if you look at the left-hand side of the page, under financial highlights, in the last paragraph, in fact, you can get to it from the second paragraph, but if you look at the last paragraph, it says NHBC's invested assets, including cash, decreased to 1.56 billion in 2018. In 2017, it had been 1.595, so a little bit more, £1 billion, by way of invested assets. Are those figures familiar to you?
They're familiar in terms of us holding assets, yes.
Yes. Yes. And the profits that we saw on the right-hand side at the bottom, that £65.2 million for the period ended 2017, would be invested back into the NHBC because it doesn't have any shareholders to whom to distribute them.
Yes, it's invested back into whatever the functions of NHBC are. Yeah.
Now, you say in your statement, paragraph 16, and again, we don't need to look at it unless you'd like to, that the NHBC board contains executive and non-executive directors from across the insurance and construction sectors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the aggregate remuneration for each of the 4 executive directors of NHBC in the year 2018 ranged between 466,000 and 334,000 per annum. Now, I can show you some figures, but does that sound about right to you?
I wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know. I think we can take that as a matter of public record. But who sits on the remuneration committee? Do you know?
I don't know.
Presumably nobody from central government, or is that a wrong presumption?
I don't know.
You don't know? No. The figures we have that I've given you, 466,000 for Ian Davis and 334,000 as the lowest for Paul Hosking. Do you know how those salaries are arrived at or benchmarked?
I don't know.
You don't. Do you know whether there's an element of performance-based reward in those senior executive salaries?
I don't know.
You don't. Can I then turn to NHBC's standards and guidance? Can we go, please, in your statement to page 5? And I want to show you paragraph 18. You say there, NHBC has several separate departments that are relevant to the information I provide below. And then you go on to say, the standards and technical department is responsible for the development of NHBC standards. This is the guidance with which builders registered with the NHBC must comply to enable NHBC to provide warranty cover in respect of those builders' developments. In the period 2013 to 15, Graham Perrior held a senior role in NHBC's Standards and Technical Department, and David Alexander White was a senior technical officer in that department. This team did not sell their services externally. They simply provided guidance internally to NHBC for the purposes of warranty cover. In particular, they did not provide guidance in respect of NHBC's building control services. Now, just to be clear, is this right, that builders who wish to have an NHBC warranty on properties that they were building had to be registered with the NHBC? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And is it also right that they had to comply with the standards that were set from time to time by the NHBC in the standards set by the Standards and Technical Department?
That's correct.
Yes. You refer to NHBC standards with a capital S. What are those?
That's a document of standards, a document which covers how or gives recommendations on how a house dwelling should be built.
And do they require anything over and above what is required by the building regulations and the associated practical guidance?
In some areas, yes.
In some areas. What about in fire safety?
No.
No.
Generally in fire safety, the minimum standard would be, to meet the NHBC standards, would be compliance with the national building regulations or building standards if you're building in Scotland.
I see. So if you meet the building regulations, then you comply with NHBC standards, so at least so far as fire safety is concerned?
Yes.
Yes. Then if you look at 18B, you say this: separate to NHBC's provision of warranty cover are the building control services it provides through its subsidiary, NHBC BCS. These services are provided through the approved inspector regime, while NHBC BCS would be paid fees for its services by the builder. Such fees are also charged to builders by local authority building control departments when they provide the building control services. NHBC BCS predominantly provided its services on projects or developments where NHBC was also providing warranty cover. While there were some rare instances where NHBC BCS would provide building control services and NHBC would not provide warranty cover, this was not something that NHBC actively sought to do. There were also far more situations where NHBC would only be providing warranty services for a project, as it was not a condition of that warranty cover to use NHBC BCS for building control. Now, just approaching that in stages, is there an element of competition between NHBC BCS and local authorities?
Yes, there is.
Yes. And how does the NHBC BCS seek to achieve and maintain a competitive edge over local authorities when it comes to building control services?
We would generally work closely with builders and we try to ensure that we are superior in terms of technical knowledge. So we sell our technical expertise to our builder customers.
When you say working closely with builders, do you mean more closely than a local authority building control officer?
No. The difference is obviously operating as a national approved inspector. We can work with a builder where they're working across boundaries, so across the whole of the country. Whereas in a local authority environment, you work up to your boundaries. So generally, you would only work with a builder in that area. So if it's a national developer, for example, you would only work with that person when they're working within the boundaries of your local authority. As an approved inspector, NHBC, we can work with that builder across the country, which gives them consistency of interpretation and a consistent level of service which they expect.
Consistency of interpretation, consistency of level of service, economies of scale?
Of course, there are economies of scale then, yes.
So you can compete on price, is that right, with local authorities?
Generally, as far as I'm aware, certainly from my knowledge from working within local authorities and then coming to NHBC are generally more expensive than a local authority building control.
And in your experience, what is the priority your customers, in other words builders, have when it comes to building control approvals?
They wish to attain the building control final certificate.
Yes. In doing so, what is their priority? Is it, let me help you, is it price and speed, or is it safety and compliance?
Price is important, but as I said, NHBC, in my experience, are more expensive than local authorities. It is about the support we can give them in building a safe home.
Right. Now, the question I put to you may be regarded as unfair because it posits a false opposite. Is it possible to have fast, cheap, safe and compliant certificates of building control?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, I put to you, was it price and speed or safety and compliance? Another way of putting the question would be, is it possible to have a cheap or competitive, fast and safe and compliant process whereby a building control certificate is obtained?
I would like to think that at NHBC it's an efficient service, but it is based on my primary role and those of my teams is to ensure that it's a safe building.
If we continue, NHBC, it says, predominantly provided its, and we've seen this already, predominantly provided its services on projects or developments where NHBC was also providing warranty cover. I think that's at the foot of the previous page. If we can just flick back to that, please. Page 5. Foot of page 5. And you say there were some rare instances where NHBC BCS would provide building control services and not warranty cover. That was not something that NHBC actively sought to do. Now, just breaking some of the points of that sentence up, what would be a reason in those rare cases that the NHBC would provide building control services but not provide warranty services?
So that would be in instances where the customer did not require a warranty. So that could be a commercial premises, or it could be student accommodation or something like that. So somewhere where they didn't need a warranty.
And why was it that the NHBC would not actively seek that situation?
NHBC provides building control services to support its warranty customers. So, and generally, the standard of work which a builder would do to get onto our register would mean that they're to a certain standard. And as an approved inspector, you can choose which customers you work with. So we chose that we want, as NHBC, where we can choose to work with customers who want to work with us because they're on our register, we would prefer to do that.
I see. Now, you say that it wasn't a condition of the warranty that NHBC be used for building control services.
That's correct.
Why was that?
I believe that goes back to the some competition authority. With 80% of the market, right. If we started to demand that people always also use us for building control, that could be seen as uncompetitive.
I see. Now, the extended warranty cover that the NHBC provides for years 2 to 10 of a building's life for non-compliance with the building regulations, I think is only available if building control was provided by NHBC's BCS. That's correct, isn't it?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, well, is it right that the extended warranty cover that the NHBC provides, so years 2 to 10 of a building's life, in other words, post-practical completion, where it's warranting compliance with the building regulations, is only available if building control was provided by NHBC BCS?
No, that's not correct.
That's not correct. You say that's wrong. So just to be clear, are you saying that extended warranty cover for compliance is available or was available even though it was the local authority building control officer who had signed off?
So if the local authority building control department has signed off, well, it doesn't matter. If we're not providing the building control, even if providing we're happy that that home has been built in accordance with the standards, we will offer the 10-year warranty.
I see. And So is it right that in relation to the provision of an NHBC warranty, NHBC standards must have been met, but it wasn't a requirement that the customer undertook the building control work on the project through through NHBC's BCS?
That's correct.
Right, I see. So just to be clear, you don't tie in use of your BCS offering with the cover?
No.
Nonetheless, is it right that you... but let me ask you this. Where the NHBC does offer warranty cover, where its own BCS through Building Control Services has signed off on the building control certificate, NHBC is effectively ensuring builders against risks substantially within its own control through the BCS subsidiary.
Yes, we have, obviously, where we're providing building control, we have more. Yeah, we have more of a presence on site. Well, we have more of a presence on site. Yeah.
Yeah, but in fact, you're doing two things, aren't you? In the vast majority of cases, I think this is right. Namely, providing building control services and then ensuring the correctness of those building control services.
We're ensuring against our NHBC standards.
Yeah.
So they're two functions. So the insurance is offered on the basis that the builder has built in accordance with NHBC standards. Building control is a statutory function, and as building control, we issue a building control final certificate.
Yeah. So the result of which, in very overall terms, is this right, that the NHBC is underwriting the correctness of NHBC BCS's surveyor's certificate on the certificate of practical completion?
Not through its warranty. We do that through our scheme of insurance, again, as an approved inspector.
Oh, I see. So let me ask then, who pays the premium for the warranty?
That is paid by the
By the
builder.
By the builder. And who pays the fees for the approved inspector?
That's paid by the builder.
And who pays the premium for the scheme of insurance?
So the scheme of insurance is paid by BCS.
Oh, I see. So that's professional indemnity insurance, is it?
Yes.
That BCS, with which it protects itself.
In order to operate as an approved inspector, we have to have an agreed scheme of insurance.
Right. I see. But coming back to these two income streams, it's right, I think, that you've got two income streams: the income stream for building control services, and in the vast majority of cases, also premium for the warranty.
Yes.
Yes. And the warranty itself covers, doesn't it, compliance with the building regulations?
Yes, in years 1 to 2, it covers everything.
Yeah.
And then in years 3 to 10, it would cover mainly structural issues.
Yeah, I see. So at least in the first 2 years, you're getting an income stream from your building control officer and an income stream for selling insurance against the risk that the building control officer got it wrong.
NHBC derives income from both of those areas, yes.
Yeah. And so that's how you compete with local authorities, isn't it? Local authorities don't offer the warranty.
Local authorities have a partnership with MD Insurance Services, who offer LABC warranty. So to many of our builder customers, local authorities are seen as a direct competitor of NHBC, able to provide warranty and building control.
And when you're offering a warranty on the building control officer getting it right, presumably that's an underwriting exercise, is it, undertaken by NHBC's underwriters?
So NHBC aren't offering a warranty on the building control being right. NHBC are offering a warranty based on the builder building in accordance with NHBC standards.
Yeah.
That's why we don't insist on you using NHBC building control.
I follow.
So where you're using another approved inspector or local authority building control, providing you've built in accordance with NHBC standards, then we will be able to offer you warranty.
Let's look at the bottom of page 2 of your statement. At 5D there, you say, and this is in relation to the NHBC's guidance, where NHBC issued guidance, this would not be of general application in the industry. NHBC external guidance would be issued to our customers, and it would indicate our requirements for a builder to obtain an NHBC warranty and, where applicable, NHBC building control sign-off, but it would not and did not purport to set standards throughout the industry. As detailed below, further checks would be carried out by NHBC before a building was able to obtain an NHBC warranty and before NHBC BCS gave any building control sign-off, in particular through our escalation process where the issue was one of fire safety. Now, just pause there and let's go also, please, to another part of your statement, page 13, paragraph 36. You say there, under 13A, it is important to understand that NHBC was only issuing its guidance for the purposes of its own customers. This was so that those customers could see what NHBC required, both in terms of building control and warranty cover. If the builder could show it followed the guidance, we were likely to accept the project in question, although we would always check each project on a case-by-case basis. And then at B, NHBC was only issuing guidance. If a builder came to us with an alternative way of demonstrating compliance with the building regulations or NHBC standards, we would consider that. In terms of warranty cover, the concept was that if a builder followed NHBC standards, NHBC would be willing to offer warranty cover, as it considered that this would be an appropriate risk to insure. And then you talk about benchmarking at the LABC in paragraph C. Now, you say here that NHBC are only issuing guidance to its own customers, but in effect, I think you've agreed before, those customers make up a very significant proportion of the English and Welsh construction industry.
Yes.
And they're builders and architects and those involved in construction, yes?
Yes.
Yes. And do you accept, I think you do, that the NHBC cover the majority of the market in terms of warranty and building control services?
The majority of the market in terms of warranty, but not necessarily the majority of the market for building control. Certainly we had a high proportion for new homes in building control.
Yeah.
But obviously the building control market is much bigger than just new homes.
Yes. And as you say, there are other bodies in the industry, the LABC being one, who also use those standards.
They can choose to use those standards,
Yeah.
but that is their choice. They're not issued for those bodies. We issue guidance for our customers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As you say, you don't actively encourage or promote it, but that's what people do. The LABC being one example.
Myself, when I was at Local Authority Building Control, I used NHBC standards as a benchmark occasionally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, benchmark is your word. It's right, I think. If we haven't established this, then correct me. But NHBC has no legal or regulatory standing to issue guidance to industry. It's a private company like any other.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And I think you say also in the next paragraph down, if we can just look at that, please. Just scroll down page 13. I was involved. Paragraph 37, I was involved in issuing external guidance from NHBC on fire safety. And when you say external guidance, do you mean for customers of NHBC or for the general building industry?
For NHBC, if it was NHBC guidance, it would be for NHBC customers. If it was through the BCA, it would be for the building control industry.
Yes. And we see that the guidance, we will come to this, but the guidance that the NHBC sent out to builders in March 2015 that adopted the BCA Technical Guidance Note 18 Issue 0 from June 2014, was that guidance for industry, regardless of whether they were NHBC customers, or was it only for customers of NHBC?
Only for customers of NHBC.
Right. And what about the NHBC guidance released in 2016 entitled Acceptability of Common Wall Constructions Containing Combustible Materials in High-Rise Buildings? Was that for industry or was it only for NHBC customers?
Only for NHBC customers.
Right. Well, we'll come back to those in due course and their influence. But let's turn next to the BCA. That was established in 2008, I think, while you were working at LABC, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Who, in terms of the actual individual or individuals, had the idea of creating the BCA?
I couldn't say who the individuals were whose idea it was to bring that grouping together.
Why was it created?
So originally it was created to tackle the challenges at that time that the building control industry was facing. A particular example of that would be there was an article by George Monbiot, the journalist, with a headline in the Times that building control surveyors in England and Wales were killing children in Africa. That wasn't the exact title, but the thrust of the article was that by not enforcing the new thermal regulations, building control in this country or the construction industry in this country was affecting obviously children in Africa. So there's those sort of challenges that were around. So I believe the professional institutions, LABC, Association of Consultant Approved Inspectors, RICS, and CABE at that point, the Chartered Association of Building Engineers, got together to sort of form an alliance that could dispel those sort of headlines and actually illustrate the good work which building control did.
So, using your example of the George Monbiot article, was the purpose of forming the BCA to protect the reputation of the building control industry or profession, whatever you might call it?
It was to increase or to demonstrate the good work which we felt the building control profession did.
I see. And the nature of the challenges that you'd come together to address, on your example at the very least, were reputational rather than to address particular technical failings. Is that right?
I'm not sure reputation would be the right word. We wanted to get out, the intention was to get out the good work which building control did. So actually illustrate the majority of the good work we did.
Right.
Yeah.
So this wasn't, just to press you a little bit, the purpose of the BCA, on what you're telling us, I think, is not to correct technical errors of the past by through a group, but to get a message out that the good work about the good work you were doing, to correct an impression.
The formation of the BCA was on that basis, yes.
Yeah. Now, the members of the BCA are 5 industry groups, I think, and I'll just run through them with the acronyms. The ACAI.
Yes.
The NABC.
Yes.
CABE.
Yes.
CIOB.
I believe CIOB wasn't a founding member. I seem to remember they joined a few months later.
And RICS.
That's correct.
Right. Who was it, or rather, why was it? Why was it decided that those organisations would be members of the BCA rather than individuals themselves?
I felt at the time, obviously, they were the two groups, LABC and ACAI, represented the building control bodies themselves, so the local authorities and approved inspectors.
Right.
And then individuals of those, and then to working LABC and ACAI, you would generally want to be professionally qualified, and you would be professionally qualified to either RICS, yeah, CABE or CIOB. So those groupings together represented both the building control bodies but also the individuals working within building control.
I see. Now, the BCA describes itself on its website, and I'll just quote this to you, but because there's no need to go to the website, but it's as follows: a unique industry group made up of representatives from clients, stakeholders, and all the organisations directly involved in building control in England and Wales. Now, we've discussed the fact already that the NHBC is the largest private building sector controlled body in at least England and Wales, if not the UK. Why was it not a member of the BCA when its main competitor, the LABC, was?
So NHBC were members of the ACAI as an organisation. LABC actually represents all of the individual local authorities. So our direct competitors as approved inspectors are the local authorities themselves, not LABC, the body. So LABC is at that time was the marketing and promotion arm of local authority building control, and it represented the individual local authorities. So in many ways it was the equivalent of it was the equivalent of ACAI in terms of representing local authorities. So NHBC the association with the BCA was through its membership of the Association of Consultant Approved Inspectors.
But why? But it was also a direct member, wasn't it?
It wasn't it's never been a direct member of the BCA.
I see. So it was NHBC also an influencing voice in the same way as the LABC through its membership of the ACAI?
Yes, we allowed such people such as myself to be involved with BCA through the ACAI, so we put people forward. Excuse me.
The reason I asked you, or put to you, that the LABC was a member is because you agreed that it was one of the 5 that was.
Sorry, I was speaking. So LABC is LABC itself. So Local Authority District Surveyors Association, which is local authority, which is LABC, is not a competitor of NHBC. It is LABC District Surveyors Association is a member association representing the local authorities who are competitors of NHBC.
Yes.
BCS.
The LABC doesn't represent NHBC, does it?
No, ACAI
Yeah.
represents
Yes.
NHBC.
So let's not get across purposes. NHBC is not the LABC and not a member of the LABC, is it?
No.
No. The NHBC is a member of the ACAI, the Association of Consultant Approved Inspectors, yes?
Correct, yes.
So the LABC, and you agree, I think the LABC is a competitor for building control services of NHBC, isn't it? You agreed with me earlier on in your examination that was the case.
When I spoke about LABC, I was speaking generally about all the local authorities. So within ACAI, there are 80 other approved inspectors who are also members of ACAI. They're our competitors as well.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit puzzled.
I'm getting a bit confused. So our competitors are the building control bodies, and they could be either local authorities or other approved inspectors.
Yes.
Approved inspectors are members of ACAI, and ACAI represents the private sector building control bodies.
Yes.
LABC represents the individual local authorities. So LABC itself, District Surveyors Association, trading as LABC, is not a direct competitor of NHBC. It represents the local authorities who are our competitors.
Yes. So to be clear then, when one looks at the membership of the BCA, the LABC is a member.
Yes.
The NHBC is not a member, but participates through its membership of the ACAI.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. But given my question, coming back to it, given that the NHBC is the largest private sector building control body in the United Kingdom, or perhaps at least in England and Wales, why was it not a member when its main competitor, the LABC, was?
I'm sorry, Mr. Millett, I think this is introducing another confusion. Mr. Evans' evidence is that LABC as a body is not its competitor. The competitor is, or are, the local authorities for whom LABC operates as an umbrella body for some purposes. Is that a fair reflection of what you're saying?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Nonetheless, its members are NHBC's competitors.
As are the remainder of the ACAI members.
Now, you began your membership of the BCA, I think, at the LABC, as you told us.
Yes.
Yes. And I think it's right to say that you were a founding member of the BCA and a member of its executive board, you yourself, personally.
Yes, I was one of the two representatives of LABC.
And in its second year of existence, you were chair of the BCA and also performed its secretariat function.
I was chair, and then LABC provided the secretariat. Not myself. It was provided by LABC, the organisation.
Yeah. What was the period of office of chair of the BCA?
1 year.
1 year. I think you were then chair of the BCA's technical group from May 2010 until December 2019, I think.
Yes, that's correct.
And you say, and there's no need to go to it, it's paragraph 168 of your statement, that involved coordinating the work of the technical group, including setting the agenda, coordinating the minutes, and organising the follow-up actions. Yes?
Yes.
And you took on the role of publishing the guidance notes as well, I think, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Why did you stop being the chair of the technical group in December 2019?
In August of 2019, I was promoted to the head of technical operations, and frankly, I had enough to do.
Right. And who took your place in that role?
So the committee decided that Brian Stevenson would take that role.
Now, you say in your statement at page 2, if we can just go back to that, please, paragraph 5b, NHBC was committed to improving the building regulations regime. For instance, it permitted me to take a significant amount of time to carry out work on behalf of the Building Control Alliance, BCA. Now, if the NHBC was not formally represented at the BCA, other than perhaps through the ACAI, why would the NHBC allow you to take a significant amount of time to carry out work on its behalf?
So it provided resources to contribute to the work of the Building Control Alliance to the ACAI. So ACAI would, so for example, on the technical group, the ACAI were asked to put forward 4 members of that group. NHBC allowed me to volunteer for that work.
How much time was the, quote, significant amount of time, unquotes, that you would spend carrying out work on behalf of the BCA while still working at NHBC?
At its height, it was probably 2 days a month, 3 days a month.
Right. And can I just show you Barry Turner's statement? We saw this when he gave evidence. It's at LABC 0011202. Page 28, please, paragraph 92. Now, he says there, I should explain that the BCA was set up as a result of a government review of the building control system and possible changes to the regulatory environment. On this issue, there was common ground between local authority building control and approved inspectors who were opposed to the proposals to relax building control requirements. From this initial purpose of support and promotion of building control, the technical group was established, chaired by NHBC, with the aim of agreeing where possible the technical interpretation of building regulations so as to reduce the scope for competition based on different interpretations and to achieve consensus. A number of organisations are represented on or participate in the BCA, and the relevant government departments were, I understand, consulted or advised on the work of the BCA and copied into papers circulated to the technical group. Now, general question, Mr. Evans, do you agree with what Mr. Turner says in that paragraph that I've just read to you?
That's not all as I recall, no.
Right, now, I'm sorry to do this to you, but let's go back to the bottom of page 28. Can you tell us what it is in this paragraph you don't agree with?
So, as I say, my recollection of why the BCA was set up was not as a result of the government review. It was as a result of the direct challenges that we were seeing and the misinformation that we felt about the building control industry.
Right. So you say he's wrong when he says that the BCA was set up as a result of, quotes, possible changes to the regulatory environment. That wasn't it, you say?
My recollection is different.
I see. Do you have any idea about a government review which stimulated the creation of the BCA? Any kind of review?
There was a review of building control, I seem to remember, when I was at Milton Keynes Council.
Right.
I can't remember the specifics at this point.
I see. Were there any proposals to relax building control standards?
Not that I can recall, no.
Right. Now, when Barry Turner refers there to, and we better go to the next page, if we can, please, page 29. But when he refers there to a technical group being established and chaired by the NHBC, is that a reference to your role chairing the BCA technical group from 2010?
So prior to the formation of the BCA, there was a group, the LABC and ACAI had a joint technical group. So as a profession, we didn't want to compete on technical standards. So there was an LABC ACAI liaison group. That group was, on the formation of the BCA, subsumed into the BCA adopted that group, if you like, and renamed it the BCA Technical Group.
Right. So there was already a joint technical group in being, as between the LABC and ACAI.
Yes, that's correct.
So if that was the case, what was the purpose, or was there a purpose to the creation of the BCA beyond perhaps the messaging that you've referred to earlier in your evidence?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, you'd already got an organisation or a joint organisation to ensure consistency of technical standards. So, given that was the case, what else could the creation of the BCA bring to the party, as it were? Consistency of messaging.
The LABC ACI technical group was purely to address technical issues. So where there were matters of interpretation of the building regulations, if some of the building regulations weren't clear, so it's purely a technical,
right.
And that group could issue technical guidance out to the profession.
Yes, I see.
The BCA as an organisation was to address the more procedural sort of joint issues, which addressed all of the challenges to building control, if you like.
And when was the LABC and ACAI joint technical group established? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Right. Do you know from your own knowledge whether there had been any instances of competition, perhaps prior to the creation of the BCA at least, based on different interpretations of the building regulations?
I'm aware in my career that I have been approached by builders who had received a different interpretation from another building control body, and asked if my interpretation was the same.
So had you come across instances where some building control bodies or approved inspectors perhaps had been more favourable to the builder than others in their interpretation of the building regulations and approved documents?
In those instances where I'd been approached, it was generally because the customer felt that the building control body was being too onerous. They would come to me and ask if I had the same interpretation.
Right.
My approach would generally be then to pick the phone up to the building control body and say, give me the other side of the story, please.
I see. And to dig a little bit deeper, was that the reason or a reason that the BCA was established? In other words, to ensure consistency in approach to interpretation of the building regulations? The
LABC ACAI technical group was formed because as a profession, we were in competition for customers, but we didn't want to compete on technical standards. We wanted to ensure that there was, where in matters, the guidance within the approved documents gives one way of doing things in most cases, and there are alternative approaches. There's also some very grey areas in there. So the technical group was formed between the two sides of the profession, so public and private sector, to form consistent interpretations which informed building control bodies what the BCA would consider would be a benchmark to go by, but would also give our customers the view that actually whether they went to public or private sector building control, they would get the same interpretation. They shouldn't be shopping around for lower standards. Now, this technical group, the LABC ACAI technical group, was anybody from NHBC in that technical group? I couldn't say. By the time I joined NHBC and joined the technical group, it was the BCA technical group. I see.
So the joint technical group LABC ACAI was merged into. Is this right? Merged
Yes,
into BCA?
yes, it was subsumed into the BCA. It was adopted by BCA as the BCA technical group.
I follow. And when you joined NHBC, who ran that technical group?
Steve Cook,
Right.
who was a surveying manager at NHBC, was the chair of that group.
I see. Now, thank you. Now, can we go please to paragraph 164 of your statement, page 59, and look at subparagraph F. You say there, in terms of its organisation, the BCA was a professional body that later became a limited company. I was not involved in that change as it occurred after my time as an executive. And then if you go to page 60, little I, you say, as it was a professional body, it regulated itself. Now, first, what do you mean by professional body?
My view is it represented a profession.
Yes. And when you say it regulated itself, what do you mean?
So as an executive, it would decide on who the members of that executive or who the member bodies were. It had a terms of reference.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, it was an unregulated, non-statutory voluntary group of trade associations or professions, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, we'll come on to some of the guidance notes that the BCA issued. You were asked in your request for a witness statement what the basis was on which the BCA was authorised to issue guidance for industry. And let's look at, on this same page, at your answer at 165A. The BCA is a professional organisation, so the 5 member bodies were authorising it to issue guidance that their own respective members may then find helpful. The BCA wanted to build consensus as to good practice within the building control industry. Now, just to be clear, and I think you've answered this already, but let me ask it one more time. The BCA never had any regulatory standing in respect of giving advice or providing guidance to industry.
No.
No. And if you look at 165B, MHCLG was a papers-only, quotes unquotes, member of the technical group. It would be copied into emails and minutes. MHCLG did not authorise the issue of any BCA technical note, but it did see the relevant papers. I cannot recall receiving any significant objections from MHCLG at any time. In my view, Richard Harrell and later Brian Martin, who were the key contacts at MHCLG, would have raised an objection had they seen something that concerned them. Now, on what basis did you believe that Richard Harrell or Brian Martin, or both of them, would have, quotes, raised an objection had they seen something that concerned them? What was the basis for your belief in that respect?
I knew both Richard and Brian through my dealings with MHCLG through various working groups or saw them at functions. And I felt that if they were the type of people that if they did see something which they were unsure of or had an objection to, they would pick up the phone or contact me or contact a member of the group to say they had some views on that.
Right. What were the various working groups through which you dealt with Richard Harrell and Brian Martin?
So I've contributed to working groups with MHCLG through the standards review or the optional regulations, the housing standards review as it was called. So that was a review of the building regulations. And I worked with both Richard and Brian through those.
Right. Let's just look at that a bit more closely. First of all, when was the standards review, the housing standards review, set up? When did it start?
I can't be sure of the exact date.
Right.
Sorry.
When did your involvement in it start?
So I was invited to join a working group which was looking at approved document M.
Right.
Access and facilities.
And when was that?
Homes. Again, it was part of that review. I can't remember the exact date. I think the optional regulations were introduced in 2013-14.
Right, I see. And the options regulations, right? So you were at the NHBC at that time?
Yes, I was, yes.
I see.
Yeah.
And that was a working group on which Brian Martin was a member, you were a member?
I believe Richard Harrell was the chair of that group.
Right.
I'd also, through LABC, as president of LABC, I'd had various membership, or invited to join various groups with MHCLG, looking at ad hoc regulations or whatever like that. So I suppose through my career, I developed a relationship with those people at MHCLG.
Yes, I see. You say there in the last sentence that Richard Harrell and later Brian Martin would have raised an objection had they seen something that concerned them. Did that ever happen, so far as you were aware?
Not that I can recall.
No. Now let's go to page 60, a little bit higher up the page, at J. Scroll up to that. In the previous paragraph, 164J, you say this: I'm aware that representatives from MHCLG and the Welsh Government would sometimes attend the BCA's executive meetings as observers, although that practice did not occur in the period during which I was chair of the executive in the early years of the BCA's existence. I do not know why they did not attend during that period, although it may have been because the BCA was newly established and still developing its profile. When did the MHCLG representatives or those from the Welsh Government begin to attend BCA meetings?
I don't know.
I don't know. Do you know how often they would attend?
So occasionally, as the chair of the BCA technical group, I was invited to attend those executive meetings to give an update from the technical group. And on the occasions I did that, I can recall a couple of occasions I did that. There was a representative from MHCLG and a representative of the Welsh Government also dialed in.
And who was it generally from MHCLG that would attend?
On a couple of occasions I can remember, I believe it was a lady called Sandra. I can't remember her second name, I'm sorry.
Right.
And from the Welsh Government, it would have been Colin Blick.
And did they ever say anything during those meetings?
They did.
They contributed?
Yes,
Right.
yes, yeah. So I think they saw the BCA as a good way of talking to the industry, both sides of the industry.
Yes, I see. Now, before the break, if I can just show you two paragraphs from page 61 of your statement, if we can turn to that. First, look at paragraph 170. You say there, I was involved in the liaison between the BCA and other member organisations in my role as chair of the technical group. The members of the technical group comprised members of two organisations, ACAI and LABC. Each organisation would provide 4 members each. However, we would always ensure that one or more of the technical group's members was also a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, the Chartered Institute of Building and the Chartered Association of Building Engineers. In fact, in my role as chair, I would need to check this annually and report to the Executive Board. The reason for that was to ensure that the work of BCA was industry-wide, having been formed based on the input of a range of industry bodies. The BCA guidance would often be used by those bodies, as well as technical surveyors and professionals within the building control industry. The technical group meetings I chaired would be held at NHBC's offices because I was the chair, and the BCA did not itself have premises. I use my NHBC email account for all of this BCA correspondence because the BCA does not have its own email addresses. Now, then you go on to say, my role at BCA was in my capacity as a representative of ACAI, and in turn I was a member of ACAI as a representative of NHBC. In other words, I was there with the permission of my employer, NHBC, not as its formal representative. That said, there are close links between NHBC and BCA. I appreciate that my day-to-day role at NHBC equipped me with the knowledge to carry out the role of chair of the technical group. From NHBC's point of view, my involvement had the benefit of ensuring that we understood views from across industry and that we were contributing to driving consistency across the industry with a view to raising standards. Now, just a few questions about that. Is it right that you took time out of your NHBC work to do the work of the BCA?
Yes.
Yes. And you chaired and hosted BCA meetings at NHBC? At its premises?
Yes.
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 And you used your NHBC email address when corresponding on behalf of the BCA?
Yes.
And drafted and published BCA guidance from time to time?
That would generally fall on me to do, yes.
Yes. So rather than close links, as you suggest, it's right, I think, that the NHBC, through your involvement, was, at least to that extent, one and the same as the BCA, wasn't it?
No.
You don't say that. You don't say so.
No.
Can you think, let me try it differently. Can you think of any occasion on which the BCA did something in the face of opposition from NHBC?
The BCA technical group would build consensus within the group. I can't actually think of any, I can only think of one occasion where the group disagreed on anything which one of the members brought to the table. So the agendas for the group were put together by me, but they weren't all my items. I would go out to the group and ask for items that they wished to raise. We would then discuss them. And generally, the group would agree, through discussion, would agree on an approach or on the question that was being asked.
And what was the one occasion where you can think of that the group disagreed on something that one of the members brought to the table?
So we were discussing travel distances within protected staircases.
And what was the disagreement?
We couldn't agree on the distance, the maximum distance that would be allowed, that you could extend the lobby to a protected staircase.
When you say you disagreed, were you disagreeing about the interpretation of the building regulations?
The building regulations is silent on the subject.
Sorry, the approved documents?
Yeah, the approved documents are silent on the subject.
Right.
But we saw some approaches to, say, for example, limit travel distances from a flat entrance door to the staircase. We saw some instances where actually the lobby to the staircase would be extended to actually make that distance. What we couldn't, now that, the feeling around the table, both from LABC and from the approved inspectors on the table, was actually, we needed to limit that on what would be a sensible distance. And we couldn't decide on a distance.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you very much. Well, as Mr. Millett mentioned earlier, we have a break during the morning, and this is a good time to have it. We'll stop now, please. We'll resume at 25 to 12. And I have to ask you, as I have asked every other witness, please don't discuss your evidence or anything relating to it with anyone while you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you very much. Would you like to go with the usher, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Millett. 25 to 12, please. Would you ask Mr. Evans to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Evans, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Millett?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Now, Mr. Evans, we're going to come back later on to the BCA, but I want to move now to asking you some questions about when it was that the NHBC first had concerns regarding the use of combustible materials in external wall constructions on buildings with a story over 18 metres. So that's the topic. When did that issue first come to your attention?
First came to my attention in 2013.
Yes. And what position did you hold at the NHBC at the time? I think we know that, but just remind us. You were
I was the building control manager.
You were building control manager. What was it that brought that issue to your attention?
My fire engineer, John Lewis, I believe we would have discussed it at one of our one-to-ones. And I believe that he mentioned he'd had an approach from Wintec at that point.
Right. Yes. Let's see if we can cut through this. Can we go to NHBC 50583, please? Now, this is an email run from August 2013. You refer in your statement to some emails around this time, but not specifically this email. And I wonder if we've got the right one. If we just have that up, please. NHB 50583. If we go to page 1, second email down, here is an email from Steve Cook to you of the 28th of August 2013. Subject, Kingspan, K12 and K15, importance high, Steve. This issue of using a non-combustible cavity insulation for all floors where there is a floor over 18 metres, and the use of cementitious backing boards or not, is causing a lot of concern to customers, compounded by NHBC's apparent change in stance now that we are picking up on it. Do we have any guidance? If so, can it be released to all? If not, can you provide some? Can we get Kingspan to test their K12/15 insulants to be non-combustible, create a niche for themselves in the market, and solve the issue once and for all? Now first, was that an email that you were referring to in your statement, when you say in your statement that you recall an email on the topic from Steve Cook?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, to the best of your knowledge, at this time, August 2013, did Steve Cook believe that K15 was non-combustible?
From reading his email, yes, I would assume that.
Would you have expected that your colleagues at the NHBC would know that phenolic foam was a combustible insulation product, as at that time?
Yes, I would have expected that.
Yes. What was the issue that Steve Cook is describing in this email? Do you know?
As I recall from this, the question was not necessarily around the combustibility of the insulation, it was the use of that insulation without a non-combustible backing board at this point.
And going to the first paragraph in in the brackets there, it says, compounded by NHBC's apparent change in stance now that we are picking up on it. What was the apparent change in stance that Steve Cook's referring to there?
I can't recall.
Were you aware of any cases where this had been picked up on, as Steve Cook says, namely the use of a non-combustible cavity insulation and the use of cementitious backing boards?
This may have been more an issue in terms of the change of position, may have been around the picking up the fact if they weren't using a non-cementitious backing board, but I can't be absolutely clear. I can't recall absolutely clearly.
Right. You can't help then about what he meant. Let's then go to the response that you sent to Steve Cook immediately above that. Can we scroll to the top? You respond to him on the 30th of August 2013, copy to John Lewis, and you say this: Steve, firstly, not for us to get Kingspan to do any testing. As far as I'm aware, they are aware of the issue, and it is for them to decide what their strategy is. As for guidance, we don't have any, but happy to ask John to look at it, and if required, we can draft something. John, can we chat about this next week? Now, again, can you explain what issue it was that Kingspan were aware of, that you say, where you say, as far as I'm aware, they are aware of the issue? What's the issue there?
I can't recall exactly, but it may have been around the use of a non-cementitious backing board.
Do you mean by that the use of a non-cementitious backing board as distinct from the cementitious particle board that was used in the 2005 test of K15, and therefore a departure from the build-up of that test? Is that what you mean?
No, from what I can recall, this original issue was around builders or the design would not incorporate the backing board, which in turn would not. At that point, we were also looking at the racking effect that would have on the lightweight steel frame backing.
I see.
So it sits in front of the lightweight steel frame, right, and actually, in some cases, provides some rigidity to that frame. So it was a dual issue as well.
I see.
We'd had discussions around that.
When you say we had discussions around that?
Internally within NHBC when that had been raised. So we'd get inquiries from surveyors such as this. So this was from one of the managers, but we also get, my team of specialist surveyors would get inquiries from surveyors as well.
I see.
On different jobs.
Now, when you say, as far as I'm aware, they are aware of the issue, how did you know that Kingspan were aware of the issue you've just identified? Had you discussed it with them as of August 2013?
I don't believe I discussed it with them, but I believed it was around this time also that John Lewis said we were having conversations about, he'd had conversations with Wintec and things like that. So I was aware of the issue around with Kingspan, the board, that sort of thing. So I believe that was what I was referring to.
Yes. I'm sorry. You say, as far as I'm aware, they are aware of the issue. That's Kingspan, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. How did you know that Kingspan were aware of the issue?
I can't remember exactly how. It may have been through conversations I'd had with John. And then, so yeah.
Right. Did you have any conversations with Kingspan themselves at this time about this issue?
At this point, I'd had no conversation with the Kingspan, no.
Now, you say in your response that the NHBC didn't have any guidance on the issue of combustible insulation. So what was the NHBC's stance or procedure at that time for dealing with buildings incorporating Kingspan K15, or indeed any other combustible insulation, in an external wall build-up at that time that was beginning to cause concern to customers?
As far as I'm aware, at this point, it wasn't starting to cause concern with our customers. But our surveyors would have referred back to the BBA certificate for the product.
Well, you say at this point it wasn't starting to cause concern with our customers, as far as you're aware, but Steve Cook is telling you that it is, isn't he?
He is, but at this point I wasn't aware until Steve had... And I'm struggling, I can't recall whether Steve was actually... And I can't make out clearly from his email whether it's about the combustibility of the insulation, or if it's the fact that combustibility, that the CP board is the fact that they're missing CP board. So this was the start of us starting to sort of look into this problem as it manifested itself.
And what was the NHBC's stance or its procedure for dealing with buildings incorporating K15 above 18 metres in the external wall build-up?
At that point, we had no specific guidance.
And no guidance, but what about its stance? Did it have a position, even informally?
So the stance would be that providing the material was used in accordance with its BBA certificate, its third-party certification, then that would satisfy ourselves for building regulations compliance.
Right, and was that so not only for building regulations compliance, but also for the issuing of warranties?
Yes, I mean, yes.
Does that tell us that up to that time, August 2013, K15 was being accepted in external wall build-ups on buildings taller than 18 metres by NHBC, both for building control and warranty services?
Yes.
On what basis?
On the basis that it met its if it met its BBA certificate.
Now, in that email there, you say, John, can we chat about this next week? Did you actually have a discussion with John Lewis the following week?
I can't remember specifically if I did.
Do you remember what transpired at all, even generally?
Well, we started to get an understanding of this. So I know John had an approach from, I don't know how, but he'd had an approach from Wintec at that point. I don't know if it was this point or just after or around that period as well. So we started to sort of, we would have started to look at some guidance to issue to our surveyors, but then also digging into a little bit deeper.
Right. Now, you say I think in essence, you followed the BBA certificate. Let me just show you what Diane Marshall says about that so that we can square the circle. Can I please ask you to be shown NHB 403434 at page 17. This is her witness statement to the inquiry, and you've told us about her role. And at the time, this is 2013, she was head of technical services at NHBC. So just to be clear, was that the head of the department which dealt with compliance covering both the issue of warranties and building control approval?
It would have been, so technical services was responsible for doing primarily for delivering the building control, but also the risk management of some areas of the warranty, yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, can we please look at page 17, paragraph 72. She says this: prior to 2015, NHBC's approach towards K15, which was allowed by approved document B, was to rely on the BBA certificate for K15 that was first issued on 27th of October 2008. This BBA certificate stated that K15 was acceptable for buildings over 18 metres tall, provided that the manufacturer's approval for the arrangement was obtained. Do you agree with that?
I do, yes.
Yes. So to be clear on what you've told us this morning just now and on what she says in her statement, is this right, that before 2015, K15 was accepted on NHBC projects and warranted on the basis only of the Kingspan K15 BBA certificate going back to 2008?
That was the basis we accepted it for building control, yes.
Does that tell us that there was no separate, independent investigation by NHBC of K15's fire performance?
That's correct.
By those in building control, in the subsidiary, the BCS subsidiary, and for the purposes of aspects of the underwriting of the warranty?
So for building control, our surveyors would refer back to the BBA certificate, the third-party certification.
Yes.
And ensure that the material, and not just K15, but all the materials would be used in accordance with their third-party certification.
And what about the underwriters underwriting the warranty? Would they also rely solely on the BBA certificate, or would they conduct an independent investigation of K15's fire performance?
It would be a similar position for the warranty product,
Yes.
as well, yes.
Were any other combustible materials accepted as suitable for use in the exterior wall construction of buildings above 18 metres by the NHBC in and up to late August or August 2013?
I don't know.
You don't know. Now, can you tell us what steps the NHBC would take, if any, when considering a project that was purporting to use ACM in its cladding system, its external wall build-up? Now, first in relation to building control services.
At what period?
At this time, up to August 2013.
So again, we would have referred to the building regulations and the guidance within the proof document B.
Right. And would that be so of those providing building control services and the underwriters providing a warranty?
So our underwriters don't look at every project. So we have our technical services would offer the technical risk management. Our inspection teams would then look at that on site, and providing our regime doesn't pick up anything should be about that. Our underwriters will not necessarily look at every project.
Right. Okay. Well, we may come back to that in due course. Do you remember at the time whether there were any ACM products that were accepted for use over 18 metres by virtue of a BBA certificate or other similar certification?
I can't be sure at that time.
You say in your August email we've just looked at that you were happy to ask John Lewis to look at that. That's John Lewis. I think he had just finished a master's degree in fire engineering at that time, hadn't he?
Around that time, yes.
Yes. Now, as a result of this exchange, did his position, or rather as a result of his just finishing his master's, did his position in the NHBC change to being a specialist building control surveyor due to the fact that he was now a fire engineer?
Yes.
So did he in effect become NHBC's in-house fire engineer?
He did, yes.
Yes. Now, before John Lewis became the in-house fire engineer at NHBC, who had provided, or had anyone provided specialist advice in that area?
No. Not internally at NHBC.
Right. But was there a reason why the NHBC required the skills of an in-house fire engineer at this time, August 2013, having never had one prior to that?
There was no particular reason, but it was we'd sponsored John through his degree. He'd expressed a desire to become a fire engineer and specialise in that area. It's always been something I understand he'd been interested in. We'd sponsor him through his degree, I was of the idea. I think myself and Diana discussed the possibility of bringing him into the specialist team to use him as a fire engineer, but also to strengthen the specialist team. Because at that point it was just Gary and me.
Now, going back to the subject of K15, as at August 2013, doing the best you can to recall it, were you aware that K15 was a combustible product?
Until this issue had started to be around that time, if I'm honest, I wasn't aware of the issue, even that it was an issue. It came onto my radar about this time, but I'd never regarded the insulation as a material with limited combustibility.
You'd never regarded the insulation as a material of limited combustibility. Are you saying that you'd always known that K15 was not a material of limited combustibility?
My view would have been that it was a material. I've never, since 2013, when I first heard about K15 specifically as a product, I've never regarded it as a material of limited combustibility.
Right. Was there a time that you did think that PIR, PUR, phenolic insulation products were either non-combustible or materials of limited combustibility?
Not that I can specifically recall, no.
Let's move then to October 2013. Can we please go to NHB 50587? And we can start, I think, in the middle of the email chain on page 1. We scroll down. This is an email of the 16th of October 2013 from Dave Cummins, who was the Project Surveyor Technical Services Department, I think, to John Lewis, copied to, this is the one at the foot of page 1. We scroll over to the top of page 2. Sorry, thank you. We see the email. Hi, John. I attended a presentation by BRE today at London Fire Headquarters and got drawn into a conversation at the interval by an AI who obviously has had dealings with ourselves over the issue of insulation materials on high-rise, i.e. over 18 metres. He's copied me in an email below, I believe came from John Bean, that is basically going against what my thoughts are on the use of limited combustibility. I don't believe K15 meets this. And wondered if this is something that is being considered by yourself as maybe a policy for Tech Zone. Could I have your thoughts on this, please? And if we look at the email below this one, if you scroll down, you can see it's an email from Andrew Maple, who's an approved inspector, to Dave Cummins, who's sending this on to you, the same day. He says, Dave, good to meet you this morning. Below is an extract of email to designers for a couple of high-rise blocks we are dealing with in Stratford. Colleague at NHBC was John Bean. And then here's the extract in italics. We are happy to provide agreement in principle to use of Kingspan K15 so far as Part B is concerned. We require 1. Fire strategy to document proposal. 2. Section drawing showing cladding and insulation and lining makeup. 3. Drawing showing cavity barrier stroke fire break provision to openings and junctions between compartment walls and floors with external walls. 4. Treatment of penetrations through the dry lining. 5. Clarification of how plaster dabs achieve an R value within the U value calculation. 6. If we scroll to page 3, 6. Our proposal is supported by NHBC, who, according to BBA certificate for K15, still seek drained cavity construction. 7. Actual condensation risk analysis for makeups proposed. So basically, is this right? Dave Cummins, looking at this email, believes that K15 is not a material of limited combustibility, can't be used over 18 metres, and is now querying that a colleague seems to have a different view and is accepting K15. Now, that's my reading of the email. I mean, you were copied in on it at the time. Is that how you read it at the time?
I can't recall reading it at the time, but looking at it now, yes.
Yes. Now, we can see Steve Cook's response at the top of the email chain on which you are copied the next day, 17th of October. Page 1 top, please, as you can see. It's sent to Dave Cummings and John Lewis, copied to you. And Steve Cook says this: the extract does not look like it came from John, and in any case, the PMs are advising customers that insulation in cavities on high-rise over 18 metres all needs to be of limited combustibility as per A/D. That's approved document. Obviously, K15 does not need a backing board stroke wall. It's rigid and is attractive to customers, but does not have test evidence that it meets the limited combustibility rating. K12 does need a backing board wall and does have limited combustibility, so is okay for 18 metres plus, but is not as attractive as K15 is to customers. So is it right that what Steve Cook here is saying in October 2013 is that K15 is not a material of limited combustibility, and so although it's attractive to customers, it can't be used over 18 metres?
Well, what he's saying is it's not a material limited combustibility, so it should necessarily be used in terms of the linear routes.
Yes, and is it fair to say that at that time, October 2013, whatever you might have been aware of before that time, you were well aware that K15, at least according to these individuals, was not a material of limited combustibility?
Yes.
And you knew that it, as such, in accordance with approved document B, it should not be used over 18 metres.
It should not be used in accordance with paragraph 12.7.
Correct.
Of approved document B, yes.
And at that time, the project managers in NHBC were advising their customers that insulation on high-rise buildings should be of limited combustibility.
Well, this email actually says that questions whether that extract comes from John.
Now, at that time... I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
It questions whether or not it comes from
yes.
John Bean, certainly. But to be clear, did you take from this email that by this time, PMs, project managers, were telling customers that insulation on any high-rise buildings should be of limited combustibility?
Yes.
Yes. At that point, mid-October 2013, did you begin to question the BBA certificate that for so long NHBC had been relying on?
I believe it was around this time that we started to look at what the BBA said and trying to understand why the BBA said what it did, yes.
Right. Now, do you recall that although these internal emails were being sent within NHBC, a little earlier that month, October 2013, the problem about materials of limited combustibility above 18 metres had come to the attention of the NHBC from Wintec. Do you remember that?
I remember a conversation with John where he informed me, yes.
Now, Wintec were facade engineering consultants, weren't they?
Yes.
Yes. Can we go to NHB 50585, please? And let's scroll down to the bottom of the email chain at the foot of page 1 and over onto page 2. Staying with the foot of page 1, this is an email from Chris Macy at Wintec of the 4th of October 2013 to Dave White, copy to Paul Savage, subject forward, Kingspan K15 insulation, David, and then if we scroll to page 2, it was good to meet at the CWCT this week. As discussed, please find attached a document that infers that K15 is suitable for all applications and is compliant with Part B. I have marked the relevant text in yellow. Our concern is that K15 does not, as a material, meet the requirements of Part B of the building regulations, in that it isn't of limited combustibility, quotes unquote. The regulations do, however, allow the use of this material on buildings over 18 metres tall, subject to a specific test on the exact form of construction used, or alternatively a report from BRE that supports the use of the material based on an assessment of its specific application, or alternatively, if it's used in masonry constructions. The sales literature from Kingspan is not wrong in its content, but infers that all applications of the use of K15 will be acceptable in all events, which we believe is not the case. K15 is widely used in industry. Having spoken to BRE, we believe it should not be without the supporting report documentation or test data to confirm its acceptability, all underlined, as the mode of failure can be affected by subtle changes in design that occur between forms of construction. I hope the attached and above are of assistance, and we would welcome the opportunity to discuss this with you further in due course. Do you agree with Mr. Macy's summary here about the ways in which K15 could be used consistently with the building regulations and approved document B?
Yes.
So, just to be clear, in order to be able to use K15 over 18 metres, the exact construction would have to be tested, yes?
Yes.
Or a report from BRE which supports the use of material based on its specific application would need to be obtained, yes?
Or from the BRE would be one of the bodies you could get that report from, yes.
And it could only be used in a masonry construction, because that's what the K15 test had been.
The test that the BBA certificate referred to was a Part 1 test.
Part 1 test,
yes.
2002 Part 1 test. Does that approach there from Chris Macy accord with the way in which NHBC were accepting K15 on projects in and before October 2013?
We would accept it on the basis of its BBA certificate.
Yes. So is that a no to my question?
Double negative there. No, yes.
Yeah. Why was NHBC not insisting that it was only where the design and the build-up of the external wall construction was identical to that which had been tested by Kingspan in its BS 8414 Part 1 test?
So as
That it would be accepted.
So we would, as a building control body, Regulation 7 allows us to accept a product where it is installed in accordance with its BBA certificate, where the BBA certificate refers to the fact that it meets certain areas of the regulations. So in this particular case, the BBA certificate at that time said that the material could be used over 18 metres, subject to reference to the certificate holder, which was Kingspan.
Right. So your answer to that is Regulation 7?
Yes.
So does that tell us, we'll come to Regulation 7 shortly, but does that tell us that the NHBC, in relying simply on the BBA certificate up to this time was approving the use of K15 above 18 metres without seeing the full test data, without seeing the details of the wall build-up, without seeing any BR135 report for what it's worth, and without any of the data indicated by approved document B.
So at that time, we would refer to the BBA certificate, and the BBA certificate, we would assume at that time would have looked at all of that information in order to make the statements it did.
And did this email not ring alarm bells with you that perhaps all in the BBA certificate that you had been relying on was not well, and that you should start immediately examining the technical data relating to each individual wall build-up being used by customers where they were using K15 above 18 metres?
I don't think I was copied into this email, so I don't necessarily think I saw this one. But through conversations I had with John Lewis, we did start to question what was on the BBA certificate, and that's why I asked John to approach Kingspan to seek further information as to what information it had provided with the BBA with in order for it to make those statements, yes.
Now, before we move on to the subsequent meeting that NHBC had with Wintec in the following month, November 2013, I want to show you two more internal NHBC email chains from this time, October 2013. The first of those is at NHB 50589. Now, you're not on the email chain at this early stage. If we go to the first email at the bottom of the chain at page 2, you'll see who is involved. This is Paul Williams to Brian Stevenson, Steve Cook, Jerry Crouch, and Martin White, 31st October 2013. Morning. Amanda Thorpe has received feedback from a customer that NHBC no longer accepts this, and it's Kingspan K15, on buildings above 18 metres as it's considered combustible. Is this something surveyors have been advised on? And if we go up the next email in the chain, here's the response from Steve Cook copying you in. This is where you get involved, 31st of October 2013, and he says, most are aware, and we have discussed at ATM meeting, Steve Evans and John Lewis are looking to provide some better guidance and a meeting on the subject soon. ATM, what is that?
Area Technical Managers.
Right. And if we go to the top of the email chain, we can see the response from Brian Stevenson the same day. You see? And you're copied in on that email. I certainly wasn't, ! Please see attached our findings when this was last raised. Can you explain, and I should just say Brian Stevenson is an area technical manager, he's one of the ATMs. Yes. Can you explain why one of your area technical managers was under the misapprehension that K15, a phenolic insulation board, was a material of limited combustibility?
I can't, no.
It's a pretty major gap in knowledge, isn't it, for an institution providing building control services and ensuring compliance?
I would hope his understanding would have been better, yes.
It's a pretty major gap in his knowledge, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's a dangerous gap.
Yes.
Now, he attaches 3 documents to his email. Although we can't see this from this version, take it from me that there are 3. One of them is Kingspan's K15 marketing literature, and the other 2 are email chains. If we then go to NHB 50592, we can see that this is one of the email chains that he attaches to his email, so you would have seen this email chain. And this is an email chain between people called KDS Associates, an architecture firm, and NHBC. And you can see from the top email what the topic is. It's Canada Water A2, insulation on building above 18 metres, Kingspan Cool Foam K15 rain screen board. Now, if we scroll down to the 3rd email down on page 1, we see that here is an email at the bottom from Juan Alberts to Chris Cooley. Chris Cooley is at NHBC, and Juan Alberts is at ADS. And he says, Chris, the majority of the Block 4, which is greater than 18 metres, is brickwork with small elements of metal and timber cladding up to 7th floor. The 8th floor is set back and will be constructed of a metal rain screen. And then, if you turn the page, he says, can we use the standard insulation board Kingspan TW55 to the brickwork zones and the K15 rain screen board to the cladding zones, including the 8th floor? Is the Kingspan Cooltherm K15 acceptable to use in our building above 18 metres? According to the documentation, it is acceptable by building control. And below that email, on page 2, there is an extract from the documentation. And if you scroll down, under fire performance, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 will achieve the results given below. It says, which enable it to be classified by the building regulations as being class 0 and low risk by technical standards in Scotland. And then go down, if you pass the test results, to the very bottom of the screen, which if we can scroll up we can see the rest of, it says this: Kingspan Cooltherm K15 rain screen board meets the criteria within BR 135, fire performance of external thermal insulation for walls of multi-storey buildings, and is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance with the building regulations / standards. Now, that's what he says. Now, if we then go to the other email chain, so this is illustrating what it is that has been sent. If we go to the other email chain that Brian Stevenson attaches to his email, which you saw, this is at NHB 50590. And if we look at the bottom of that chain, there's an email from Chris Cooley on the 8th of April 2011, so way back in time. If we go to page 2, Chris Cooley to Brian Stevenson, 8th April 2011, cavity insulation buildings over 18 metres, Kingspan K15. Brian attached the details of Kingspan K15 that we agreed could be used in this situation. I've informed the Arch that the K15 should be used throughout the elevations where the walls are 18 metres, 18 plus, not just the areas above 18 metres as he proposed. He confirmed that they would carry this out, but said that the thermal insulation value was not as good as the TW55. Now, given the dates of the emails that these two strings that you saw, about 3 weeks apart, can we take it that K15 had been accepted by NHBC without asking for large-scale fire testing data or an assurance that the build-up was exactly the same as the rig in which the K15 had been tested to BS 8414 Part 1?
The use of Kingspan K15 would have been in accordance, or should have been accepted in accordance with its BBA certificate.
And that's all?
That, providing the builder could demonstrate that they'd met the conditions within the BBA certificate, then yes, I would have assumed that it would have been accepted.
So to cut a long story short, can we take it from this that during 2011, 2012 and up at least to late 2013, the NHBC was sanctioning the use of K15 in buildings above 18 metres without question as to the underlying data?
We would have accepted the BBA certificate for demonstrating compliance.
Right. And what about metal cladding that was proposed for build-ups? What kind of testing was that subject to before NHBC would approve it for building control in 2013?
The surveys would have checked if, again, third-party certification, if it met the various clauses within the building regulations.
Right. So again, just checked against the BBA certificate?
If it had one, yes.
If it had one?
Yeah.
What if it didn't?
Then we would. I would have expected the surveyors, project managers, to ask for additional information to satisfy then the building regulations, all the standards, and all the standards.
Do you accept, looking at what I've just shown you, that even at the end or towards the end of 2013, employees at NHBC were unfamiliar with the building regulations and specifically approved document B and the circumstances in which combustible insulation materials could be used in external wall build-ups above 18 metres?
No, I don't accept that.
Well, Brian Stevenson says, I certainly wasn't. And we've seen that that's his comment at the very top of the first email chain in which he attaches the emails I've shown you. And he was showing you those to demonstrate that he was not aware that K15 could not be used above 18 metres.
He's not aware that the Kingspan can't be used over 18 metres. He may well be aware of all the building regulations which govern its use.
I see.
So this is all about the misunderstanding in terms of K15, how it could be used, how it was classified, and that started us asking questions of Kingspan itself and the BBA.
Now, the second email chain I want to show you is at NHB 50594. And if we start in that email run, please, at page 3. At the very bottom, the second email chain from the bottom. In fact, I could show you the last email chain. It's probably best. It's from Paul Williams, who's an area technical manager, an ATM, to the Southwest Area Technical Team. That was, I think, your team at the time, wasn't it?
It was one of my teams.
It was
yes.
one of yours.
It was one of my
below
teams.
the wash.
Yes.
Yes. Surveyors, all. Amanda raised a question on the use of Kingspan K15 insulation in wall constructions in buildings over 18 metres. Steve Evans and John Lewis are currently reviewing whether we can accept this product for use in this situation, as we have doubts with respect to the combustibility aspect of the product. We will continue to accept it in ongoing projects that have started and where it is being built in. We won't be accepting it on new projects until we've carried out further investigation / research into the combustibility aspect of the product. And then if you go up the email chain to the next one, we have an email at the foot of page 3 from Chris Cooley to Brian Stevenson a few days later, 8th November 2013. Brian, any idea how long Steve and John will take, as we are involved with the design team meetings and need to pass on our requirements at the outset of the design process? If we are not going to accept K15, what are the alternatives? As far as we are aware, there are no other foam insulation boards that meet the requirements, so all high-rise will be forced to use rock wool. As you can imagine, this will cause a major issue with our customers, as they all use board insulation to gain their U values. I hope Steve is ready to take the barrage of inquiries. Do you agree, looking at that many, if not all, NHBC high-rises were using rigid foam insulation, predominantly for cost reasons and to meet U value requirements?
It was used on a high proportion of those buildings, yes.
High proportion. Do you know what?
And generally, because of its performance in terms of thermal UVOs, I couldn't speculate on the cost aspect.
And can you give us an idea of how high these proportions were? What sort of proportions are you talking about?
I couldn't. No.
Do you agree that for NHBC to say that they would no longer accept those forms of insulation, combustible insulation, on buildings above 18 metres was going to have a massive effect on its own business?
It would have a massive effect on our builder customers in terms of then asking them to change their specification, yes.
Yeah. And that is this right? Why it was that Chris Cooley anticipated that you, Steve Evans, that's the Steve I think, had to be ready to take the barrage of inquiries?
Yes.
Yes. Let's then go back to the meeting with Wintec in November 2013. Can we please go to NHB 50604 and page 4 in that email run? Now, this is an email from John Lewis to you, Graham Perrier, Dave White and Gary Jarvis of the 15th of November 2013. Subject, combustible cladding systems in buildings exceeding 18 metres in height. Notes from Wintec meeting. And if we look at the first line of the email, we can see that John Lewis says this: hello all, some notes from this morning's meeting together with the first draft of an internal guidance note. Now we'll look at the internal guidance note shortly. I just want to focus with you, if I can, please, on the notes of the meeting. And at point 2, it says this. Wintec outlined the route to compliance as recommended in ADB 2. The procedure is, and then there are 4 bullet points set out there in some detail. And I don't want to read them all out to you because it's long, but you can see that the first bullet point refers to paragraph 12.7 of ADB, limited combustibility requirement. Then the second bullet point, use of a material of limited combustibility, or MOLC, will meet the requirements of ADB 2 and say B4, that's external flame spread. Definition is stated in table A7, European classifications A1 or A2. Third bullet point is the alternative route, para 12.5, and I'll read that to you, is for the client to submit evidence to us that the complete, underlined, proposed external cladding system has been assessed according to the acceptance criteria in BR 135. The method of determining this is to carry out a fire test in accordance with BS 8414 Part 1 if the cladding is fixed to the face of an external masonry stroke concrete wall, external wall, or BS 8414 Part 2 if the cladding is fixed to and supported by a structural steel frame. The BS 8414 tests do not give a pass-fail answer because the data obtained is used by different bodies with different minimum requirements. However, for building regulations, any test using this method needs to be supported by proof that the acceptance criteria of BR 135 have been met. Refer to pages 19 and 23 of BR 135 2013 for details of these. And then the fourth, the client may instead submit a desktop study report from BRE stating whether in BRE's opinion BR 135 criteria will have been met. Such a report will be based upon test data which BRE already has in its possession, and so this option will be of no benefit if the products have not been already tested by BRE in multiple situations. And stroke arrangements, other test bodies, Chiltern, Warrington Fire would also be acceptable, but these bodies are not known to have any test data. Now, that information is there set out. And then paragraph 3, if you just scroll down, deals with thermosetting insulants. And it says, thermosetting insulants, rigid polyurethane foam boards are combustible. One large manufacturer undertook a successful BR 135 BS 84141 test using their insulation as part of the cladding build-up and are now stating that it is an acceptable product for use in walls exceeding 18 metres. However, this statement appears to be flawed because, and then it sets out what that is, what those flaws are. You can see them there in those 3 bullet points. I don't want to read them out aloud. Now, the general question, just having shown you some of the detail here in this email, is this. Was the information, as recorded here in John Lewis's note of the meeting, provided by Wintec at that meeting about the use of combustible materials, new information to you and your colleagues?
No, I don't believe it was.
No. Does what he sets out here accord with your recollection of what was discussed at that meeting?
I wasn't at that meeting.
You weren't at the meeting?
No.
In the third paragraph, as the reference, as I've read to you, one large manufacturer. When you received this email, did you know who it was that John Lewis was talking about?
Yes.
Who was that?
Kingston.
Yes. And the insulation was?
K15.
Yes. Now, among other notes that John Lewis takes from that meeting, there's a point at page 5 I want to ask you about. We can turn to page 5, next page. Paragraph 6. Class 0 does not infer any resistance to combustibility. It is solely a measure of the spread of a flame across the surface. Was that something that you were aware of in 2013?
Yes.
Was that something that, so far as you were aware, was well known to your colleagues at NHBC in 2013?
Yes.
Did you know, or do you know now, why it was that Wintec felt they had to mention this in this meeting?
I don't. No. I believe it was just a general discussion around the regulatory framework.
Right. You don't know. Did you have a discussion with John Lewis about why it was that Class 0 had come up for discussion in this context?
I didn't know.
Might it be the fact, and tell me if this is wrong, that this very basic principle had not been understood by your customers and needed to be clarified?
It could be, but as I say, I wasn't at the meeting, so I can't understand the context. I can't give you any information in the context it was raised.
Just in general terms, at the time, were you aware of any degree of confusion in the construction industry about what Class 0 meant and what it stood for?
Certainly, subsequent meetings I had with builders, yes, there was some confusion.
And in summary, what was that confusion?
Builders would often see if a product had Class O, that they would also assume that it was also a material of limited combustibility.
Were you surprised to learn that your customers were labouring under that confusion?
In some cases, yes.
Right. And if we stick with this page and look at the next paragraph, it says this: there's a problem that other BCBs are not applying the criteria. This is likely to be as a result of a lack of knowledge. We should be aware that by following the above approach, we may be seen as being awkward, stroke obstructive, if another BCB is willing to accept it. As such, should the issue be raised via the Building Control Alliance, etc., Wintec would be willing to give talks, stroke presentations on the subject. Now, was John Lewis a delegate at the BCA at the time?
No.
No. Do you know who it was? And I know you were not on this at the meeting, but do you know who it was who raised the idea of having the BCA issue guidance on the matter?
It may have been John. It may have been that as a result of if Wintec was seeing different building control bodies applying different standards, which that John put it forward as the Building Control Alliance as a way of addressing all of the whole of the building control industry.
Mm. Now, paraphrasing some of the rest of this email chain, if we scroll up from page 3, up page 3, we can see that John Lewis forwards the notes of this meeting on to Brian Stevenson at the bottom of that page, and then Brian Stevenson responds to you. Guys, has this technical guidance note been approved? As if so, I'd like to cover at my team meeting on Friday. And then if we go up to page 2, John Lewis responds to that and says, hello, Brian, no, not yet. It's just a first draft at this stage. Please don't circulate it. And if we go to the next email up in the chain at the top of page 2, we can see that you then write to John Lewis and others, including Diane Marshall, on the 19th of November 2013, and you say, hi all, I have a BCA technical meeting on 9th December. If we can format this note into BCA format, I can get it tabled and hopefully agreed as BCA policy guidance. John, how will this affect the Kingspan boards that sparked, pardon the pun, the issue off? Now first, do you know whether any of those who were copied into this email chain were either members or delegates at the BCA?
I think Diane Marshall was a member of the executive through her professional association, the Chartered Association of Building Engineers.
And was this first draft of what was to become the BCA Technical Guidance Note 18?
Yes, I believe it was.
And then we can go to John Lewis's response. If we go to the bottom of page 1, this is also 19th November 2013. You are a recipient of this together with Brian Stevenson. Hello, Steve. No problem. I'll change the format and recirculate it. And then he says this. From what I gather from Wintec, Kingspan K15 was tested in one instance on a masonry wall construction. On this basis, Kingspan claim that it is suitable for use in buildings over 18 metres high. But when you dig down to the detail, it's only acceptable if the wall construction is exactly the same as that tested. Most of our schemes are steel framed, with a METSEC or similar external wall build-up, and so the Kingspan test doesn't hold true. And if we follow the ADB and BR 135 guidance, we shouldn't be accepting it. Even with a cementitious liner board, the product is still combustible and so doesn't meet ADB 2 recommendations. According to Wintec, Kingspan proposed to test multiple combinations of cladding, liner and insulation, but didn't see this through after the first test. Hope this helps. Now, first, do you disagree with what John Lewis says here about NHBC accepting K15 or other combustible materials over 18 metres?
I agree in terms of the linear routes. However, the product then had a BBA certificate which said it could be used in accordance with paragraph 12.7 of ADB2 over 18 metres, where it was referred to the certificate holder. So in that basis, that was on the basis that we could accept it.
Well, hold on. Okay. You're referring there to the BBA certificate version, which referred to 12.7, which is the linear route.
Yes, sorry, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not following then, because if it's not a material of limited combustibility, it could not satisfy the linear route under 12.7. Could it?
This started to cause the questions that we had in terms of why was BBA saying that it was a material of limited combustibility.
Indeed. So can we take it from that as at November 2013 at the latest, looking at this email, the NHBC knew that they shouldn't be accepting combustible materials in an external wall build-up of a building over 18 metres, except in the specific circumstances set out by Wintec at the meeting and as recorded in the email?
Or where it had a BBA certificate which verified that it could be used in that position.
Well, you say that, but would that not be susceptible to the problem that the BBA certificate was not covering any buildings other than those specifically with a build-up as tested by Kingspan, whereas you are accepting many more?
The BBA certificate at that time did not put a restriction on, was not clear, and did not put a restriction on the fact that it could only be used in the tested configuration. The BBA certificate at that time stated that it could be used and was suitable, could be used in accordance with paragraph 12.7 and could be used in buildings over 18 metres, subject to reference to the certificate holder. So on that basis, as a building control body, we accepted that.
Well, sorry, I'm interested in this. Can I just ask you this? You had to be satisfied, presumably, before you gave approval to the use of K15, that the use was covered by the certificate. If it wasn't going to be employed in the configuration as tested, which wasn't the case in most of these, you would have to get some assurance, wouldn't you, that there had been a reference to the certificate holder and that the certificate holder had given approval. Did you ever do that?
I can't verify on every job that we accepted K15 if that was done, no.
Well, can you give any comfort about the fact that you ever did it?
I can certainly say from the 2nd of December of this year in 2013 when I issued an email around to all of our teams that should be the case.
So should we understand that before you sent that circular around, people did not get an assurance from Kingspan?
No. I would hope, as I said, I would rely on my surveyors referring to the BBA certificate, seeing that it needed reference to the certificate holder, and seeking assurance from the builder that they had that.
Did you ever, or do you know if any of your surveyors actually saw a copy of some form of assurance from Kingspan? I'd be interested to know what it said, you see.
Yeah, I don't. But there are examples which we may come to where we've seen letters from Kingspan, which were issued on that basis.
All right. Well, perhaps I'd better be patient and see if we come to them. Yes, Mr. Millett, thank you.
And we will. Just at this point, though, you were aware, weren't you, that the majority of the schemes that the NHBC were providing services for, whether it's underwriting or whether it's building control approval, were steel framed.
So the buildings themselves could be steel or concrete frame, but there was a lightweight steel frame infill.
Yes. And the majority of those steel frame buildings above 18 metres where they used insulation were using K15, yes?
I was aware that a high proportion of them were, yes. I couldn't tell you the exact figure.
Yes. Even though, in fact, the BBA certificate made no reference to any test done by Kingspan in respect of K15 under BS 8414 Part 2, 2005, for steel-framed buildings.
The BBA certificate referred to a test, but the BBA certificate, in its conditions of use, did say that the material could be used in accordance with paragraph 12.7.
Well, we'll come to the BBA certificate, which is now a little bit like Banquo's ghost. We will come to it in due course. Before we do, can I just take you then to the attachment that John Lewis refers to as the first draft of an internal guidance note. That we will find at NHB 50605. And we can see the heading of this document, NHBC branded, NHBC Building Control Services Limited Technical Guidance Note XX, Use of Combustible Cladding Materials in Residential Buildings. If you look at that sentence and the one underneath it, use of combustible cladding materials in residential buildings, we see the word cladding there, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, why? Why cladding?
I don't know. I didn't title this to start it off with. Yeah.
What did you understand by the word cladding at the time?
So I think this note was to address the whole of the wall construction.
Right. So the entire build-up.
Yes.
Now, the red tract amendments, I think, were yours, weren't they?
It looks like it, yes.
Well, I think we can make that good just by showing you a document, just to be clear. Can we go to NHB 50604? We'll come back to this document in a moment, but here's an email from you to John Lewis, 21st of November 2013. Hi, John. My comments on the note that you put together along with the format of the BCA guidance notes. And then you say, in respect of Kingspan, I think we should put a note together of our concerns and approach them direct. Brian had them in his team meeting for some CPD some time ago. So we'll have a contact to begin with. Happy for it to go in my name. That's your email. So can we be confident that the red tract amendments in the guidance note in draft were yours?
Yes.
Yes, let me go back to it then. Let's go back to NHB 50605. Now, back on the word cladding, do you know whether, and I know you weren't at the meeting, but do you know whether Wintec and NHBC had a discussion, along with the K15 topic, about the fact that modern cladding materials, by which I mean rain screen panels or materials, were combustible?
I don't know.
You don't. Do you know whether there was any discussion at that time, as between the NHBC and Wintec, about the use of ACM, particularly ACM with a PE core?
I don't.
Now, looking at external surfaces on this document, about a third of the way down your screen, it says all external surfaces should comply with diagram 40 of ADB2. Now, what was your understanding at the time of what diagram 40 of ADB2 required?
So for buildings over 18 metres, the external face of the wall should be Class O.
Class O. Anything else?
Diagram, that's what diagram, for my understanding at that time was of diagram 40.
Right. Did you recall at the time that there was an equivalence of some kind, at least, drawn in diagram 40 between Class 0 and European classification B, BS3D2?
Probably not at that. Probably not at that time. It had been some time since, obviously, at this time, since I'd used the diagrams in terms of practicing surveyor.
Had it? Is that right? You wouldn't routinely look at them. Is that right?
Not in the right, unless there was a specific issue which I would then needed to dig into the building regulations for. It wouldn't be something, because I wasn't dealing day to day with those projects.
And then further down the page, we can see, just towards the foot of the screen, if we can scroll up, we can see the rest of it. Combustibility of cladding components in buildings exceeding 18 metres in height. Now, under that heading, it says, where the building exceeds 18 metres in height, paragraph 12.7 of ADB2 refers to the need for limited combustibility of all elements of a cladding system. Note the words all elements of a cladding system, please. And then you go on. This includes the insulation, internal lining board, and the external facing material. And note the words there, external facing material. The exclusions are smaller gasket parts and similar low-risk items. And then over the page, if you turn the page, it says, it says in the middle paragraph, if no actual fire test data exists, the client may instead submit a desktop study report from unsuitable independent UCAS-accredited testing body, BRE Chiltern Fire or Warrington Fire, stating whether, in their opinion, BR 135 criteria will have been met. The report should be supported by test data. The test house, the test house already has in its possession, and so this option may not be of benefit if products have not already been tested in multiple situations / arrangements. The report should specifically reference the tests which they have carried out on the product. And then there's something about thermosetting insulants there. Now, going back, if we can, please, to the previous page, where you refer under the heading combustibility of cladding components in buildings exceeding 18 metres in height to the bits I emphasised, all elements of a cladding system and the external facing material. What did you understand the phrase all elements of a cladding system there to mean?
All of the wall.
Including the rain screen panels?
Including the rain screen panels,
right.
Yes.
Now, what was your understanding, therefore, at that time, about how diagram 40, on the one hand, and section 12.7 of ADB, on the other, interrelated?
Diagram 40 would cover the external face of the cladding. Paragraph 12.7 referred to the insulation and fillers, whatever. Yeah.
Well, let me try it differently, because by that answer there doesn't seem to be a relationship. But did you understand, by endorsing the expression all elements of a cladding system, which would include the external facing material, that the external cladding panel would have to comply with both diagram 40 and section 12.7?
Well, 12.7 is specific in talking about insulation. Diagram 40 then talks about the external face, but it was our view, that the entire wall construction should be non-combustible. I'm aware that there is an anomaly in the regulations and an interpretation which is different from that.
I want to know what your understanding was at the time about that, because you say here, or the NHB is preparing to say here, that all elements of a cladding system should be of limited combustibility. But do you accept that, in fact, there wasn't anything in ADB at the time that said that the external panels had to be of limited combustibility?
Yes, my understanding was the
Right.
regulation said that at the time, yeah.
So was it your understanding at the time that the external cladding panel had to comply with diagram 40 so far as the surface was concerned, and be class 0 or European class B as purportedly equivalent, and also be a material of limited combustibility?
The interpretation which you could have, and this is the problem with guidance, isn't it? There's interpretation. The interpretation could be and indeed was relayed back to us, that the cladding itself, as long as the cladding was Class 0 or European Class B, that it didn't need to be a material of limited combustibility. However, I think through this, our view was that all of it should be a material of limited combustibility.
And did that extend to the core of an ACM panel?
It would extend to the panel itself.
Well, does that include its core?
It would do, yes.
Right. And was that because of your understanding of 12.7 or any other aspect of ADB, or was it a piece of just a view you had that in addition to what ADB was saying, the panel should be of limited combustibility?
It was our view that should be.
Even though that view was not reflected in the language of ADB?
On one interpretation of the language within ADB. Yeah.
What interpretation of ADB would produce that view or support it?
It depends how you regarded there was a filler, I suppose, would be the answer to that.
Yes. Did the word filler, was that the subject of discussion within NHBC at the time of the production of this draft to support the idea that the polyethylene core of an ACM panel had to be a material of limited combustibility, if it were ever possible? Was there a discussion about that at the time?
If I'm fair, at the time we were discussing, we were putting this forward, this was more, our focus at the time would more have been on the combustible insulation. And I'd assumed, and I assume it's a big word, that when we were talking about an external wall being resisting the passage of fire across it, that would extend across all of the wall.
You see, you've pointed to the word filler, and we'll come to the filler debate later in your evidence, but I'm just really seeking to understand, as a matter of fact, at the time, whether there was discussion within NHBC at the time about whether the core of an ACM panel should be treated as filler and therefore mean that the panel should be of material of limited combustibility.
There were no specific conversations at this time.
No. So then what was it that was the seed of the idea, of the view, as you call it, that all elements of a cladding system, including the external facing, needed to be of limited combustibility? Where did that come from?
It would originally come from John because he drafted the guidance and I didn't question it.
Do you know where he got it from?
I don't. No.
Do you know whether he got it from his understanding of ADB or whether it was an idea he had to plug a gap in the ADB or resolve an anomaly? Do you know?
I don't know.
You don't. Now, if we go back to page 2, please, you can see in the paragraph I read to you, which starts, however, if no actual fire test data exists, we there see the reference to desktops from a UCAS-accredited testing body. Was that the first time that the NHBC, or next up, the BCA, had considered that ADB should be complied with in that manner, in other words, by the use of a desktop study report from a testing body?
No, we were familiar with desktop study reports before this.
Where from?
So you would see desktop study reports for other elements of construction, fire doors, for example, cavity barriers. You may see them for other, not just affecting fire, but other areas of the regulations as well.
Let me try the question differently then. Was this the first time that the NHBC or the BCA, as it was going to be, had considered that ADB, that those parts of ADB relating to the external wall could be complied with by the use of a desktop study?
It was certainly the first time that I had been aware of that, yes.
Yes. Do you know whether that option, what became option 3, was discussed with Wintec at the 4th of November meeting? October meeting, 4th of October meeting.
I would take it from the record of the meeting that yes, it was. I believe it was mentioned in that as one of the routes to compliance.
Do you know what their reaction to it was?
Well, I can't be certain that whether we raised it with them, or whether John raised it with them, or they raised it with us.
After that meeting, by which I mean in the period between that meeting and mid-November, when we see this first draft of what became TGN 18, was there any discussion internally within NHBC about which part of approved document B, which section, or what language permitted the use of a desktop study as a further alternative route to compliance for insulation material above 18 metres, where that material was not a material of limited combustibility?
There were no specific conversations in terms of the acceptability in this application, because we used to receiving desktop assessments for other areas and other materials and other configurations.
Right. But, am I right in thinking, therefore, that there was no discussion at the time within NHBC of whether historically the use of desktop studies had been shown to be a robust and reliable way of achieving the functional requirement B4?
There was no discussion about that, no.
Indeed, there was no track record on which you could draw at all, was there, so far as desktops for satisfying the functional requirement B4 was concerned?
Not for B4, but as a building control body, we would be used to receiving desktop studies as part of our daily work on other materials and other makeups.
I see. Had there been any specific discussion within NHBC about the methodology to be adopted when generating a desktop study as a further alternative route to compliance in relation to an external wall build-up, where the build-up was going to include combustible insulation above 18 metres?
When you say the methodology, can you
Yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
The scientifically approved and proven steps which create a method by which somebody sitting down to produce a desktop would do that exercise.
I'm not sure at this time if there was a scientific way of doing that, but you would. The accepted practice was to look at the tests that had been carried out on those. If I take an example of a fire door, you can't test every size or every makeup of a fire door, for example, and how the components go together. So you do a range of tests, and then a fire engineer would take a look, would extrapolate from those tests or take information from those tests, pull them together to illustrate how the particular makeup they were proposing would then work using that evidence.
Was there any discussion about whether or not it was appropriate to extrapolate from the use of desktops in relation to fire doors to the use of desktops as a further alternative route to compliance for an entire cladding system?
There's no restriction in the building regulations on on where those desktop studies can be used.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was whether there was any discussion, as a matter of fact at the time, about whether it was appropriate to extrapolate from the use of desktop studies for fire doors to the use of desktops for cladding systems.
No, there wasn't.
No. Was there any discussion at the time about whether a desktop using data from failed 8414 tests would be acceptable? Or, when I say failed, what I mean is where the data would not meet the criteria of BR 135.
Not at this point that we were generating this guidance, but we did discuss the usefulness of failed tests at subsequent times. Yeah.
We may come back to that then. Thank you for that. But was there any discussion at this time within the NHBC about what the minimum qualifications of the person writing the desktop report should be?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go next to the BBA certificates for K15.
Would you rather not embark on that?
I think it might be better to take it in one go rather than to break after 4 minutes.
Yes. Well, I think that's sensible.
But I don't want to lose 5 minutes, so I'm in your
Well, it
hands.
doesn't really matter. I think 5 minutes isn't going to make all the difference.
I think that's probably right.
And by the time we leave the room, it won't be 5 minutes anyway. Mr. Evans, it's time we had a break for lunch. So we'll stop there. We'll resume, please, at 2 o'clock. And as I said to you earlier, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it. That includes lawyers, by the way. Not I suspect you wanted to discuss anything with them. No. But and we'll see you at 2 o'clock, please.
Thank you very much.
So who'd like to give the usher? Thank you. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock then, please. Thank you.